Welcome to Stories of Transformation, a NRCDV Radio podcast production. I am Arlene Vassell, NRCDV's Vice President of Programs, Prevention, and Social Change. Pronouns she, her, hers, and will be your guest host for this special episode for Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, centering connections, voices from the field. Today, NRCDV Radio is talking to three amazing community leaders working to improve the lives of Black and Brown youth in their communities. I am super excited to welcome Ana Isabel, Jacqueline Miller, and Tonjie Reese. They will be sharing their experiences working with and alongside Black and Brown youth and strategies for meaningful engagement with Black and Brown youth. So, Ana, Jacqueline, Tonjie, can you introduce yourself to our listening audiences? Your name, organization, and what motivates you to continue your youth engagement work? Ana?
Thank you, Arlene. Hello, everyone. My name is Ana. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and she, her, hers. The organizations I currently represent are UJIMA, which is the National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black community, as well as Soul Sisters Leadership Collective based in Miami, Florida. I want to say what motivates me to continue to be part of this work is essentially my identity has intersected so many different narratives, and I see it reflected every day in the work I do with the youth. And I feel like this representation and visibility is way too important for me to try to disengage. And I see that as a Black queer femme, that it is something that is not as tangible for this youth. And when they see that there's spaces where folks like me exist, it becomes something that allows them to be vulnerable and transparent. So I feel like that is what really motivates me to keep being a part of these spaces and uplifting their voices and their experiences.
Awesome. Thank you. Jacqueline?
I am Jacqueline Miller, and I am the Director of Racial Equity and Social Change with the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, as well as I am the founder of Healthy Actions Intervening Responsibly, known as H.A.I.R. And I use the pronouns she, her, queen. I stay in this work. I just love engaging with and with youth just across, like within my own family, my community, and just even across this nation. The work that I've done over the past 20 plus years. And then even more specifically geared towards youth over the past 6 years, listening to our youth and recognizing many areas where they are adultified, they are not allowed to be children and youth. So I bring that experience to this conversation today, as well as the number of years of work experience I have within the violence against women movement, as well as being a survivor. So I once was a youth, and I tend to visit that part of myself quite frequently. And then my last thing is, being in a community, engaging, being a presence there. You know what? I have become the mama of so many. I mean, so many, not only youth, but of some elders too. They end up calling me mama. So I'm just so excited to be here today. Thank you, Arlene.
Oh, welcome, Jacqueline. Thank you, Mama. Tonjie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Tonjie Reese. I'm the founder of 1124. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And the reason why I say this work and what keeps me motivated to do it is a lot of what Ana and Jacqueline said is young people. Just getting to engage with them and to learn more about them and their experiences. And just seeing how being a young person has evolved and what that means now compared to like 10 years ago is different. So I just enjoy just learning from young people, and also for especially for Black and Brown young people, many times organizations don't prioritize young people of color. You know, many times we focus on mainstream, who is the most accessible, what communities have the most resources. And so that means many of our young people don't get that same type of information or education or support. So that's really why I created 1124, was so we had space, we had opportunities for education for communities of color and anyone really who's in the margins who don't always identify with mainstream education programming, and want things that are more community centered and rooted.
Mm. Thank you, Tonjie. That leads into our next question, because this is exactly why we're having this conversation, right? Because typically organizations don't have the conversation, don't create space for us to really hone in on the needs and the wants of Black and Brown youth. So thank you for that. So Ana, what are you hearing from Black and Brown youth in your communities regarding their needs and wants? And I should also add, and expectations of, quote, allies, unquote.
Yes, I think it is extremely helpful to put the quotes around allyship, because even from the Black and Brown youth that I serve and that I'm in community with, a lot of the times is that when we're talking about allies, they're looking for something that's a lot more intentional, something that implicates people more. And what I mean by that is having them show up in a way where they are experiencing vulnerability that Black and Brown youth experience every day. And it tends to be difficult to really see that from folks that we would deem allies, because it puts for them in danger their power dynamics, right? And folks don't want to do that. They don't want to kind of give up that edge or advantage. So a lot of the Black and Brown youth that I really work with really want something that's intentional and not performative. That is something that they keep emphasizing over and over again, that they feel like a lot of what they see within these mainstream organizations around collectivism and organizing tends to be really performative. It tends to be something that they're doing just to meet a quota, if you will. And seeing that their lived experiences at the end of the day are still being erased. A lot of our origin stories are erased. And even the lack of acknowledgement when it comes from the movement of that, honestly, Black women, femmes, particularly Black queer women and femmes, had such a big part in leadership of this movement, of the anti-violence movement, and particularly anti-sexual violence movement. Just that kind of erasure and not knowing that part of the history and not having it uplifted is something that they don't, they don't understand or don't find excusable, right? And they also tend to point out that they want to see uh, a representation that is not just catered toward the dominant culture. So they want to see something that is culturally responsive. They want to see something that isn't curated to be more easily digestible, and they want it to be raw. But it's something that, in all transparency, a lot of different organizations, affiliates, and people aren't willing to do yet, because again, it compromises their stance of what of their power dynamics. Or it's something as simple as when we talked about this before with my youth, and they are always ready to tell it how it is, and I love it because it's very raw. And I love that they have that empowerment, encouragement to do so. But it's something that we talk about, for example, when talking about racism in this work and in the resources they have and in how they're represented. Is that, a lot of folks don't want to talk about just being non-racist versus being anti-racist, things like that, foundational conversations like that, and having that accountability. So I will say the youth are looking for accountability and folks just not being performative because they ain't with it. And they want folks to really step up to the plate and show that they're trying to be intentional and purposeful.
Oh, thank you. Jacqueline, that was heavy. Thank you so much. Jacqueline, what are you hearing from Black and Brown your communities?
Thank you, Ana. I echo much of what you said. What I have been hearing from youth within my community, the Black community, is that what we need, white organizations that has resources and all of this money, to stop coming in thinking they know what we need, to take a step back, to listen. Many of those organizations have come into the Black community, which is what I've heard youth say, and design programs and come and say, we're here to help. We want to be a support, specifically around like the issue of mental health, mental wellness, in terms of bringing resources and bringing staff, bringing their entire organization under the guise of wanting to provide mental health counseling and support. Only for many, in many situations, in many cases, is that those organizations have bogarted their way in and pushed out Black-led organizations that was there, long-standing, many years, doing the work, connecting with families, meeting new family members as they were born, providing resources such as job readiness programs, housing, food, activities, after school activities, only to be once again pushed out. So what I've been hearing Black youth say, they've been talking about like the gentrification, being pushed out of their community, the places where they've gone to do music. I think of several communities that I've engaged with youth talk about the studio that was located in the heart of their community, in a community center where they had access to, right, support to do their music. Spoken word is a big thing for the youth that I engage with. And those organizations have come in and pushed their support systems and organizations out. So what do they want? I have heard them say, we want you to listen. We want to not be monitored. We want to have a platform for our art, for our craft, right up the street as we've always had. And that you don't make your needs and your ideas and your programs more of a priority than what we, the youth, are saying. And our expectations is that you meet those needs. Like you do your own work, you do your work, you check you to so that if you're so concerned about us as youth, then that you're able to meet those needs and fulfill our wants just by simply recognizing your own issues.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Pushing out community leaders and the mamas resonates with me a lot, right? Yes. And just listening. So far we've heard more intentionality, not being performative, listening. Our origin stories are important, being culturally responsive. Tonjie, talk to me.
Yeah, all of those things. And some things that I've been hearing from young people that I work with in my community is having safe space. Having space to be themselves and to come in as their full selves. Just as Black folks, Black and brown folks, many times we have to perform as adults. and we have to take off our mask and put it back on when we're in certain spaces. And young people have to do the same exact thing. So just having that sacred space for them to be themselves is really important. Can I come in as my whole self without feeling judged and still feel like I am accepted and I belong? I've also heard just even opportunities to get involved, like just making young people aware of opportunities. Because I personally believe that there are still young people who are activists. I still believe that there are young people who want to get involved in this movement from an activist space, but they don't always just get those opportunities, or not aware that this is a opportunity for them to fight for something, to make some kind of difference within their own community. So just knowing that there's stuff around, I think, is important for Black and brown young people. Also, just knowing adults are doing the work too. For the young people who are already activists, being in solidarity with them and a community with them, not feeling like our work is separate from the work that they're already doing, and feeling like we're co-conspirators together as opposed to being adults who just know everything. So, taking that adultism out of it, looking at young people as our peers, especially in the movement, but also in their knowledge too. Many times we come in with this perception that young people are just these blank slates that just don't know a whole lot about things like healthy relationships or unhealthy ones, who can't identify what abuse is, when the reality is many of them do. And they also have more evolved perspectives on relationships. Young people, I feel like, have now are really in touch with things like autonomy. And I think those opportunities, we can encourage them to be autonomous, encourage them to create their own identities, to be themselves and value what they have to say. That is how we create programs that feel like we are actually allies for young people, and not just telling them what to do, or not just making it so that they have to fit into whatever mode we think prevention is. It really is about them. It's really about what they need and building on what they already have experienced. Many young people start dating in dating with air quotes in second grade, right? Like very, very young middle schoolers are in relationships. So that means they have some type of relationship experience, not just seeing people in their communities and in their home, but their own. So that's what I've heard too, is just needing us to know that, and us to respect their experiences as being valid, and offer them just more knowledge on top of what they already have, and also value their opinions. And I think too, just opportunities just to, again, have that safe space to be themselves and to stretch out what they know, and to be seen as someone with valuable information.
Woo! Huh. Thank you for, you all defined allyship. So thank you. So yes, with the quotes on that, because everything that you all said just really helps to define, right? What is an ally? You all are, engaging in this conversation as allies. You've demonstrated that with the young people that you currently work with and work alongside and listen to. Clearly, you all are listening to young people based on everything that you all are saying. So how do you adapt your programming, right, to meet Black and brown youth where they are? How are you showing up in order to really see and listen to Black and brown youth? Ana?
I really enjoy this question because it brings up the topic also of what we deem to be professionalism, which is a lot of the times rooted in white supremacy. So just to, I guess, to give more context to that, when I have these space with my youth, and I say this with anybody with who I'm engaging with, but particularly my youth, because systemically they've been conditioned to think that they have to speak a certain way, they have to engage in a certain way, they have to show up a certain way. And I let them know that them coming as who they are, with their lived experiences, with their kind of modality and limited accessibility, whether it be directly or indirectly because of the school they attend, because of different upbringings, that whatever they show up as is what it's meant to be, and it's what it's gonna do. It's what's gonna happen, and it's what's gonna make that impact that they feel like they kind of weren't meant to have or to do. So I always tell them, like, look, in this space, I don't believe in that kind of professionalism. I don't believe that you have to engage in a certain way. And I want you to know that even like when it comes down to your dialect, when it comes down to what you feel are jargon words in this movement, what you feel are just barriers in general, this space isn't meant to cater to that. It's meant to cater to you, and it's meant to cater to um, this historically excluded voices, because again, as I think I've stated before, this movement constantly erases Black youth, particularly Black feminine girls, and their livelihood. So when I am creating different when I'm creating different events, different actions with them, I make sure to prioritize that they're feeling that this is not only a safe space, but a brave space for them to be able to hold me accountable and
Mhm.
hold the people that they work with accountable, because I often talk with them about being equitable. And I'm like, what that means is recognizing the kind of privilege and dynamics that exist. And if you gotta pause and say, hold up, Anna, I don't agree with this. I need you to pull it back. I need this programming to look a certain way, or I don't feel comfortable, then do it. I'm not here to be a what's the right word? To be pandered to, is that the right word? I'm not here to have that. I'm here to be held accountable and to uplift you, because I truly see myself as just a vessel to uplift that and to uplift their agency. So I let them know, whatever you feel gives you that agency, whatever you feel gives you that sense of transparency, you do and you carry it out. So I make sure that my space is very much that. And I always let them know, like, hold me, hold anyone accountable. And if you feel like I need to hold someone accountable for you, let me know. Cause I ain't got the time either. And I'm not worried about people's perception of me if it means that I'm advocating for y'all. Cause a lot of folks probably will have a problem with it, but it's not my concern at the moment. So I also feel like it's important for in these spaces that they understand that as we're moving together in whatever actions and discussions we're having, that it's okay that they're learning as we go. Because something that I've also been told by youth is that, this is work that they see and that they appreciate, but they feel so intimidated by, whether it be because of some of the way we theorize it so much, the way that we don't really recognize that a lot of this work was programmed out of kind of like an academic stance. So they feel very intimidated, they feel kind of pushed away, because it isn't something that they feel like really reflects them in a very cultural way, which I agree, because academia again is rooted in white supremacy and wasn't meant for folks like us. So I always let them know that this is something that you can be engaged in, you can be an active part of this community and learn as you go, because no one is born to be this like outright amazing organizer from the get-go. And that I always let them know, I'm like, look, let alone your lived experience, whether you're 16, 17, 15, your experience already at that age is a world loads bigger than any academic in any setting in any higher education. I'm like, they write their case studies and their books about you, about your experiences. They don't have the range about what you have at 15 years old. So keep that in mind, that you are very powerful in that. But yeah, definitely giving them this space and agency, and having it be really transformative for them.
Yes, we're we're on audio, so I'm finger snapping, finger snapping. So I'm just saying this for our listeners. I am finger snapping through this entire conversation. Thank you all so much. And Jacqueline, what do you want to add to, like, how are you adapting your programming to meet the needs of young people that you work alongside?
Yes, Arlene, before I do that, I'm connected with you on that snapping, that finger snapping. Yes. And you know what? It also brings to my mind an amazing, amazing Black woman who's calls herself a weaver. Come on here, Mathina. Yes. I'm thinking about Mathina and the clapper. I mean, if I had that, you would hear that right about now. I think for the next time I'm gonna have that clapper ready and with me. Yes. Go ahead, Mathina. I see you, sis. So what I like to add is like, how am I showing up? I am showing up. I have been showing up, and I do show up as one of the community healers. Now, I never really considered myself to be that until I really like did some self-reflection and like, who am I? Who am I? And when I show up, what do I show up to bring? So, like, as a community leader, as a community healer, and looking at like the many models, like the healing circles I have been with the youth in my community within like the healing circles, and like what does that look like from their perspective. Many of them had a very, very different experience working with Black-led organizations as they were brought in and valued for who they are. Now, one particular, like I'm just going to give a really quick example on this. What does that look like? Whereas they worked with the Black-led organization, and then for the white-led organization that came into their community, recruited them, right? Recruited them and brought them into their space by hiring them. And the youth was like sharing their experiences, how it was a very, very different experience. And Anna talked about like this professionalism. And really, you know what, y'all? It really set them up for failure. Many of them saw themselves as, I'm doing all right, I'm good, I'm doing all right. And like wanting to grow and planning towards their future, you know, they really thought that the benefits, so to speak, or the resources that they were offered would really help them in their plans for the future. Well, when they began to talk about those experiences and began to reach out to the community or began to come to Big Mama's porch, come to Big Mama's house, you know what I'm saying? They would come and show up at Big Mama's house and they want to sit down and talk. And we made space and came to the kitchen table. That's what I'm used to, y'all. Going to the kitchen table of Big Mama, sitting down, talking it through, talking it out. And so these youth that were talking about that was very, they felt betrayed. Many of them talked about feeling a sense of betrayal, that there was a lot of dishonesty, that they were not sincere, and that they really did have a hidden agenda. And so when youth have talked about what that looks like and like the collaborations, they also talked about, they brought their mamas into the conversation. Youth, they were very easily and quickly able to see that their mamas weren't invited like Black women. Black women didn't have a voice. Like Black women were silenced, and the youth saw that, and it was very, they expressed it being very troublesome, to the point that they began to do plan their own like civic leadership training, where they then decided for themselves. Tonjie talked about that they would decide for themselves and define themselves. And that's what I saw the youth in my community begin to do, which is counteracting or counterattacking like the negative stereotypes that comes through the media, the monitoring, the policing. And they talked about the impact that such actions have on their lives, that really does like had becoming to like chip away at the fullness of who they are as a full person, a whole being. And it's just so awesome to have this role, which is Like, okay, so what does professionalism look like when you're talking about Big Mama, right? Or Big Mama's house, or Big Mama's porch, or Big Mama's table? Like, the youth know the places in the community where they can get that type of love and respect. And when there's some harm, youth experience a lot of harm in my community. When that harm takes place and occurs, where is that support system? Where is that support person? And we, as leaders, we've made it known in our community who we are. We've made it known to them that you can come right on over here, and we have some love ready for you. We hear you. We hear you. And then as I conclude, I would say, the youth are they talked about this too. Once we were at a community meeting, and one of the youth stood up and said, the issue that I have with a lot of adults, with you all in this room, you have people at the table you don't even know. She said, you don't even know who you have at this table. You don't know what they're doing behind closed doors. You don't know what they're doing behind your back. And then she concluded with saying, that's why we can't trust you, because you need to know who you're dealing with and who you're collaborating and partnering with.
Thank you. And before you chime in, I just want to bring the big mamas in the house. I want us to just hold on to Big Mama's kitchen table. Let's visualize that and all the love and healing that happens at Big Mama's table. And let's all just create this image of Big Mama porches. Yes, let's hold on to Big Mama table and Big Mama's porches. Thank you for those, Jacqueline. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Tonjie.
Woo. You're right. Big Mama's table. This just so happens the day that we're recording this is the anniversary of my grandma's passing, and who was my first teacher of relationships and body autonomy and understanding how you give consent. So I am so grateful that she raised that up. That was just so divine right now. But that is what's needed, right? Like you said, grandma's table, knowing where we first learn these things. And that's why I include a lot of dialogue and storytelling in my work. Mm-hmm. I tell stories. I keep my things personal. I talk about my grandma. I talk about the folks who have inspired me. I talk about my experiences, because stories is how we learn. We learn from hearing other people's experiences. We learn everything from stories. And so I even give space for young people to share their stories. And in the work that I've done recently, I've been privileged to work with different communities of young people of color, especially young Black people. So on one end, I'm working with first-year college students at a university in Kentucky, and that is what the programming looks like. It's having roundtables and sharing space and giving them permission to share their stories and letting them know that their stories belong here. Talking to them about family, like you said, kind of unpacking and uprooting where we even learned our relationship patterns and dynamics, where we learned what was acceptable in relationships. And that is a big part of what they said is what they needed was family. So we created that dynamic. That is what our programming looks like together, is us getting together and just talking around the table, like you said, and having the discussion and conversation. On the opposite end, I also work with parenting and pregnant teens who are living in a shelter or in transitional space. And our conversations look different, because not only are we talking about relationships, we're talking about co-parenting relationships. How do you still maintain healthy relationship practices with someone you may or may not be in a relationship with? How do you use those things when parenting? What kind of things do you want to teach your kids? What does that look like? How do you want to encourage those healthy relationship skills right away? How do you want to uplift things like autonomy and independence and being honest and trustworthy? How do you want to uplift those things? So it's really with 1124, I like to do things that are adaptable. I don't believe that it's a one size fit all method. I will come prepared with something, but really giving space for young people to guide the conversation. And I keep talking about dialogue and conversation because that is really how I can be adaptable. And I also do that through media literacy. I like to use the culture. I don't shy away from what is already being exposed. I think especially as prevention educators, sometimes we might again feel like we're bringing in all this information as the most knowledgeable, but we also may come in with stock information and it's not really applicable or applicable to real life. Or sometimes trauma can be so heavy, I don't want to have to think about my own situation when I'm processing what unhealthy and healthy relationships look like. So what else can we do? We look at TV shows, we look at songs, and we look at the lyrics of songs. And that way we can detach our own stories from it, but also apply to something that's already relevant for us. So I use all type of shows. Some of my favorite ones to use are like All American, Queen Sugar. I like to use Bold Type. And I really am a person who already enjoys media in general. So for me, it's just looking at what I already watch, what I'm already viewing, what people are already connected to, and using that as our baseline, because that's something they can always go back to. They may not remember all of those healthy relationship skills, but I can recognize if this is something that's unhealthy when I'm listening to this song. If I'm watching this show and I see somebody being overly jealous, now I can recognize that. I can see how maybe art can imitate life, or is it something that can actually happen in relationships? Did that character handle that situation well? And that's something they can keep doing. So it makes the education be really rooted in the real world, because we're not teaching math or English. We're not teaching things that are really classroom. We're talking about life skills. We're talking about things that they can carry with them outside of just being right now in this space. What could I use that's later? So in addition to that, we just like to have fun. So with parenting and pregnant teens, the group I work with, Alternatives for Girls here in Detroit, we dance at the end. And we will hustle and we will listen to music, and we know that we need a bit of and in both. We can hear about these things that might trigger things in us, but at the same time we can release by moving our bodies. We can also counter all those things, and that's acceptable prevention work too. We can also do things like make vision boards. We made waist beads in one session. We can use all of these things that are having to do with our bodies and apply it to prevention work. So I'm a true believer that in order for us to be effective in prevention, we have to keep it rooted in the real world. We have to keep it rooted in their own lives and give them space to bring their lives into the conversation. I also love social media. So that's another way I engage with young people, are through social media posts. And again, using culture. So I made a post about WAP and how you talk to young people about WAP. I recreated some Drake photo cover albums and talked about healthy relationships. So it's using all kind of forms of media to make things relevant, to make them feel empowered to create their own media if that's what they choose, and to just be mindful of what they're digesting. It's not to say that we can't listen to music. It's just saying now I'm just more aware. Bell Hooks calls it a witness of it, being a witness of what is going on, and how can I use what I'm witnessing to make different decisions or to keep making good decisions I'm already making. And also make it adaptable by just not moving off of assumptions. We know that people assume so many things about Black and brown young people. And so when we really give them opportunities to tell their own stories, we take away the assumptions. Now they're creating something totally new. And all our job is to keep pushing them in that direction, keep moving them forward, and keep letting them feel like they're the experts, because they are. They really are the experts in their situations. And sometimes as adults, we can just offer them a bit more. It's only an offering, right? Just like the things, like we said, grandmamas told us, it's an offering. And we still will grow up and we'll still make our own choices and decisions, but at least somebody offered us something different. They gave us something that we can move forward with.
Yes. Yes. Okay, I'm digesting all of that. And Tonjie, I just want to bring your grandma back into the space. Thank you for sharing your grandma with us today. And we just want to take a moment to honor her legacy, because you are because of her. So we want to take a moment to just honor your grandma. Thank you for sharing her with us today. Yeah. Whew. All right. So before I move on to the next question, I'm going to bring Sister Matthias clappers. You can't see it, but you can hear it in this space. Sister Mathina, who's also an amazing advocate for Black and Brown young people, bring you into this space as well, my sister. So we're clapping with your clapper to bring you and your work into this space as well. All right, so you all were getting close to our closing and our time together. And you all have shared so many amazing strategies already. Do you have any additional strategies that you want to share for meaningful engagement with Black and Brown youth? And how do you know? You all have shared some information about how do you know your strategies are effective? Because young people have told you that. The young people you're working with, they've told you what's not working and what is working. I still hold on to Ana saying she creates space that's meant to cater, right, to young people, and the realness of what Ana said about young people calling her in and holding her accountable. I think for me, that's how you know you've created space, right, for young people to tell you. So any meaningful strategies that you all want to share? Anything else, Ana?
Thank you, Arlene. Something that I definitely echo to folks who are trying to engage, particularly Black and Brown youth, into these spaces and conversations. And this is from the perspective of I've worked with college age students as well as high school students, right? And what I always impress upon people is that these youth, their labor, whether it be emotional, intellectual, what have you, should never be viewed as free or a default or given. There should always be some kind of compensation, and it should be an equitable process. And what I mean by that is a lot of these folks, because their identity is made up of so many marginalized communities, they're almost conditioned to just give away a lot of this great knowledge and thought without even receiving anything in return or being kept in the process about it. A lot of times we kind of we exploit them. Not kind of. A lot of organizations, a lot of institutions exploit them. And this can be in the most well-meaning way. A lot of institutions will hold things like listening sessions, group sessions they're like, okay, how is your experience on campus? How is your experience within this school? And use that to kind of evolve their procedures, protocol, practices. But all of that they're using, all of that knowledge to help them inform to how to do their job that they should have been known how to do and be culturally responsive to. They use that and go about having all of these great measures of accomplishments and all of this, and they leave the very people that they aimed to cater to in the dust without any follow-up, without any agency in how their voices were curated, and without any say in any kind of programmatic things that may have come for those conversations. And I always impress on people that is literally going 3 steps in the wrong direction again. When we're talking about giving them authority in these spaces, I'm talking about something that is real. Again, going to, like, I think the first point I made, not being performative. When we have them be part of these conversations, when we're talking about revising policies, when we're talking about different action to take on campus, when we're talking about students who have come out on social media in different forms of activism, holding their institution or a space accountable, we need to make sure that when we bring them in to fix our mess up, that we're giving them the guidance and the go ahead to say, please let us know how to curate this. And we want to acknowledge that this is coming from you, and we want to compensate you in whatever way that may look like. But a decent compensation, because this is not. I'm not, and personally, I guess as a conviction that I tell a lot of my Black and Brown youth, our labor ain't free no more. So whatever kind of response you need for to make sure that you're being compensated for that, make sure. So I always impress that when we're doing this work, please have them have the agency. Do not let it be performative. Let them hold you accountable. I think that that puts people in a really vulnerable place, and again, it makes them. Uh, I think folks are initially really intimidated and scared by this because it leaves room for them to be attacked, and that's not how they should view it. It's about vulnerability. It's about being really stepping into the youth and their perspective and kind of feeling really feeling where they're coming from. And something else that I'll say that folks should be mindful of is the generational gaps that exist with how we work with uh, our youth now versus how folks that they have to interact with, whether it be different victim service providers, different folks in admin, and just institutional folks, how severe the generational gap can be and how that can affect the way that they come about when they're trying to look for help, when they're trying to start initiatives. um, I see all the time that, for example, the administration is very much stuck on a lot of misogyny, a lot of internalized racism, a lot of trying to conform to professionalism, and they inflict that on the youth and expect them to respond to that. And the youth are not about to do that. The youth have set a standard for themselves, and they're not going to let themselves be coddled in any kind of way or let themselves be patronized. So I really urge folks to kind of to start thinking about how to relationship build and bridge that gap, because from my experience of having to talk to both sides, it is severe. There is a gap there that isn't being talked about, especially within the Black community, and in regards to how we view survivorship, how we view being trauma informed. There is a severe gap that needs to be addressed. And from where I'm sitting, the youth are 100% on the right side and trying to help people come up to pace. But there is something there that we need to have an internal conversation about. But again, and emphasizing to not be exploitive towards youth labor, to give them that agency throughout the whole process, not just the beginning or the middle or the end, the whole process. And also make sure that we're talking about generational gaps that exist, because they do contribute to a lot of the harm that youth experience and kind of negate them from continuing this kind of work. So definitely that.
Ooh, thank you. Jacqueline, any additional strategies that you want to add?
Yes, thank you, Arlene. I want to thank you for grabbing that clapper. That just took, I was like, yes, there it is. That's the sound. That's the sound. Come on. And something else, I love reflecting. I've learned that reflecting is my superpower, y'all. So I got a couple of reflections real quick before I go on to the next piece. Arlene mentioning like honoring Tonjie's grandmother at this time. And Tonjie, I like to join in doing the same as well. And when Arlene mentioned that you are because of your grandmother, that reminded me of Ubuntu, which the young people in my community have been talking about. Ubuntu, I am because you are, and like we are, and the spoken word. Yes, Tonjie, I see you, I feel you. Like sharing that common language. And, the youth in our community, we're sharing language, like common language. Ashe, Maya Hotep. Come on. Yeah. Maya Hotep. Abaragani. What's going on? And so the youth in my community, that's where we at. That's what we've been doing. That high energy, seeing each other, that spoken word jams, and like Big Mama been showing up to those, y'all. Yes, Big Mama been there, cheering the baby on, clapping it up. So also I had a moment like Sankofa looking back. referring back, reflecting back. And so one of the youth in the community, Antonio, he talks about the onus is on us. And that's what I've been seeing the youth in my community is like, the onus is on us. It's on us. So what they have done, they have called for me to come and do workshops to talk about teen dating violence, to talk about domestic violence, to talk about safety, looking at safety planning, safety issues within their community. Many of them have shared the experiences of domestic violence for their parents, for family members, and many of them for themselves. And so we've done a lot of like coordinated community response within my community in terms of like addressing domestic violence. And then the other thing is like this one organization that H.A.I.R has collaborated with, is Annie B. Jones, the Annie B. Jones Community Center. And so what we've done, the youth have used that space to make space for like having these conversations, tough conversations, challenging conversations. And what I've also seen, they've called each other out. Like they've called each other out and have pointed out what's considered unhealthy, what healthy relationships look like as well, which Tonjie amazingly, beautifully, describe what that looks like. And just connecting with the other big mamas, like there's one, Mama Evelyn, like the youth, I've seen them, they have the names, they know who specifically the names of big mamas are, and so for Big Mama, we are also, we've been talking about like how to use hands, like hands are not for hurting, hands are not for hitting, but that we've done like some community projects in terms of like blocks of beauty, which ABJ, Annie B. Jones Community Services have done with youth, like the blocks of beauty, where the youth would specifically find and identify the beauty that's within their own block and then connect with those block club leaders. That's one thing that's been done, and some amazing outcomes where they turn their sitting with those community leaders into art projects within the community, where they put it in the yard and let everyone come by, that drive by or come by, to see the beauty we recognize for ourselves. And we define beauty for ourselves. We define beauty for ourselves and what beauty means versus the white European standards of beauty. Right. So that's another thing that I have seen happening. And then the last thing I'll share is that where the youth have, many of the youth that I've engaged with, which is part of the ABJ Millennial Tribe, that they have, they uplift each other and like their art. Many of them are caterers, many of them are into media, many of them are into fashion design. And so they together have come together and designed what this looks like, what our needs are, and how we like to be heard. So I just celebrate today Big Mama's hands. We talked about the kitchen, we talked about the porch, we talked about the table, but we got to bring in Grandma's hands, y'all.
Yes.
You got to bring in Grandma's hands. Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm feeling all the grandmas and the mamas. Yeah. Teachers, leaders, healers, right? We've been doing this, grandmas and mamas, we've been doing this without official titles for a very long time, right? So Ana talked about the professionalism and the titles are attached to those, right? So yeah, that's a whole nother podcast. But go ahead, Tonjie, any strategies that you want to add?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you to Ana and Jacqueline just already for what you lifted up. Definitely heard, do not exploit young people. Many times we use their stories and their labor and say, well, you're giving back and this is how you contribute, not really recognizing the need for healing in that process too. And there's no healing when you're being exploited. That can happen. So I also, like Jacqueline mentioned, the same things as we bring up Ubuntu, We bring up Sankofa. We say Ashe and Amen because those things are welcome here. And that is something that I learned from Kalima Johnson at the Sasha Center. And it's a organization here in Detroit that supports survivors of sexual violence, especially Black women. And we just started doing a group for young people. And those things are welcome. So we might have some sage. You might have some Florida water. So it's all acceptable here. We might have some crystals on us, and you can bring it up and we can talk about it because that's welcome here. That is our practice. That is what we use. And, you know, it reminds me of Alice Walker talks about things being a model and how we are able to do things because we have models that came before us. Just as Alice Walker had people who modeled before her, we have people like Alice Walker and Audre Lorde and Pat Parker who we can model our programming after and make this valid. Bell Hooks, this is all valid. They are our models, and that is the best we can do is to continue to create those models for young people. And that means giving them permission again to be themselves, letting them know this is valid prevention education work. Yes. These are skills you can carry with you. And just for adults, just to be open. That is the biggest thing, to be willing to be adaptable and know that what you've been doing for the past 10 years probably don't work right now. Maybe you have to switch it up a bit and be willing to be humble about that and be willing to make young people the experts in part of your conversations. Another part is not to make assumptions about what they know, letting young people lead, to listen without judgment, empower them in projects that they want to create and things that they want to do, uplift and support the work that they are already doing. I would say, especially for like high school and early college age young people, uplifting their work and letting their work be seen as being valid, and allowing young people to set the tone and end conversations that they don't want to have, like not forcing them to talk about things that they don't want to talk about, and being okay with that, and knowing that even if you didn't solve everything right then and there, that any conversation you have has impact. And that's something I learned really early in doing this work when I was going into communities and we were having conversations about consent. And I remember it was like a predominantly Black group of students. And one young man stopped me and said, "But Tonjie, hold on. You telling me I can't say these things that sound like coercion? What do I say then? How do I let somebody know?" And you know, initially I was like, whoa, that is a really specific question. But we talked about, you know, what it means to like spit game to somebody. What's the difference between spitting game and talking to somebody, but in coercing them? What's that fine line that's there? And I'm like, I'm not going to give you what to say, but we can talk through how you can create your own game, because I can't give you the game. Either you got it or you don't. But how can I really make it shift, make the conversation shift to a place where both people who are in a situation can feel empowered and can feel like they can voice their own thing. So those are the conversations that are needed, because where else can you get it from? Well, who else, who else is really like has that as their mantle to talk about things like relationships with young people? Not many people, right? It comes from our families, like you all said. It comes from people who are willing. So if you are an adult who has already chosen to do prevention work and chosen to be in conversation with young people, then recognize that you have an important responsibility, but you also can give space for them to make their choices. So that is what I like to offer. And then also, like Ana said, be okay with being called in. Yes. It's okay. You know, I don't know everything. I might have been here a little bit longer than you have, but I'm still learning myself. So let's talk about it. What can we learn from each other? How can we really encourage each other? How can I use lessons I've learned to offer you something? But how can you give me knowledge on other things, like what does dating online look like for young people right now? How are you using technology? Are you breaking up with people over text messages, or are you calling people, or are you meeting up? Yeah. What does that look like? Because these are things that shift and change. Technology is ever moving. So the more that we commit ourselves to being in conversation and dialogue and in community with young people, actual real community where they don't have to deny themselves and who they are, the better chance we have to move towards prevention and recognize all the different roles that we can carry and encourage people to be, young people especially, to be not only a part of the movement if they want to, but also just to make relationship decisions that feel good for them and the people they're involved with.
Yes, yes, yes. I am so full. It's like my time, 10:49 Eastern, and I am full already. I am full for the day. This is giving me so much joy, and so much hope and so much inspiration. So I know for our listeners, you want more, right? And so for listeners, I just want to say, remind you, you're listening to Centering Connections, Voices from the Field. I would say amazing, amazing, amazing voices from the field. I need to change that title. But anyway, Ana, Jacqueline, Tonjie, any closing, just a couple gems, just a couple words. You've already poured so much into me, into this conversation, into just the cups of our listeners. Anything else, like any closing, like nugget, gems, couple words. What do you want to share? Ana.
Thank you, Arlene. I will say a closing gem, so to speak, and I often tell this with folks that I work with that engage with youth and also the youth themselves, because I feel like we oftentimes get very caught up in the implications of this work, and because it can be very traumatic, and it can be something that we don't see until we're burnt out. So what I often tell folks is, please give yourself grace. Give yourself grace to understand that there's humanity in what we're doing, even in the mistakes we do, and that moving forward, kind of passing along this empathy to those that you come across, because there's also, as much as this is a space where we want to have that strong agency, we had to remember that we are also are coming from a place of survivorship, and survivorship looks so many different ways, and that can also just be being able to kind of deconstruct and fall apart a bit in order to pick up the pieces and come together again and have a collective impact. So to just have grace with yourself and the work you're doing, and engaging with youth, because it's again, this is something that it's going to be constant, it's going to be powerful, and we want to make sure that above all else, folks' well-being and humanity is being centered.
Thank you. Jacqueline?
So the studies are showing that Black children are not, Black girls in particular, are not allowed to grow and make mistakes and learn, simply because they are overly adultified, and they're likely to be corrected immediately, and that correction is harsh. So I say this, is that let's consider transformation and transitions as an honor, as sacred. Let's consider transformation and transition as sacred and honorable.
Thank you. Tonjie?
So something I like to say often is that we all have a role in violence prevention, and it's really up to us to determine what that would be. And we can encourage young people to have those same roles, especially Black and brown young people. Letting them know that this is something they can be a part of. And even as like adults, sometimes some people's role is to be educators. Some people's role is to be the mama and to be the person someone can talk to and get their healing and support from. Some people's role is to raise awareness and to share posts on social media and to promote the work that Black and brown led organizations are doing. Some people's role is to be a part of conversations like this. Some people's role is to create content. It really is something for everyone, and we all can be a part of it. Some people's role is to, promote uplifting media and songs. That might be other people's role, to switch up what we listen to. So I think that if we all just commit ourselves to being willing to learn and to be willing to be adaptable, then we can move towards that space to prevention together and know that we are all needed. It is not just this amazing group of folks that are here on this call. It is everyone within our community. And it's, I think, my role I like to think about is to educate, but also to empower and to create opportunities for people to figure out what their role is within their own community and what that might look like.
Thank you. And because I know people want more, right? Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experiences with all of us. And people may want more. How can people get more? How can people get more from you all? Do you have any direct contact information that you want to share? I know for NRCDV, folks can visit dvawareness.org for additional information about Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, and for awareness materials all year long. Do you want to lift up any contact information for individuals to continue this conversation with you, learn from you? Jacqueline?
Yes, thank you, Arlene. I can also be reached at NRCDV. You can go to our website, as Arlene has already mentioned. Also, Healthy Actions Intervening Responsibly. It's www.healthyactionsinterveningresponsibly.com. And so you can reach out to me and you can send me a message there. And I'm also on Facebook, which is Healthy Actions Intervening Responsibly, known as H.A.I.R.
Okay. Tonjie?
Yes, so you can find more information about 1124 at 11-24.org. So that's 11 spelled out, -24.org. And on social media, most active on Instagram is @_1124. So 11 is always spelled out with the number 24. So that is the best way to reach out and to contact. And please follow on social media because I like to have fun on there.
Okay, Ana?
Thank you, Arlene. If folks want to contact me for any kind of work around training, speaking, consulting, feel free to reach me at www.anasanz-saumeth.com. That's ANASANZ-SAUMETH. And if you want to get in contact with the organizations that I work with, like H.A.I.R or Soul Sisters, that's also a great way to reach me, and we can have some great collaboration. So thank you.
Awesome. And for our listeners, this contact information will also be in the description, but also wanted you to hear directly from our guests. So to all our listeners, thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening in to our Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month episode, Centering Connections, Voices from the Field. What is the one thing that you will do to center connections this Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month and beyond? Because the work doesn't stop in February. So again, I want to thank Ana, Jacqueline, and Tonjie for sharing your wisdom and your experiences with us. To hear more NRCDV podcasts and to access additional resources on gender-based violence and related topics, visit NRCDV.org. You can also find our podcast on our YouTube channel, Spotify, and iTunes. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at NRCDV and follow our guests. Stories of Transformation is an NRCDV Radio podcast production brought to you by the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. Support is provided by the Administration on Children and Families, Family and Youth Services Bureau, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Its contents are solely the responsibility of the authors and guests and do not necessarily represent the official views of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Again, thank you so much for joining us.